Hello and welcome to another stream, Matura Express stream. My name is Chris and today we're gonna talk about graphs, tables and statistics. As I've already told you in the introduction of the stream, today's stream is all about describing graphs, tables and statistics. If you're doing the A-levels, or if you came to this point where you have to do the exam, it is very important to be able to describe graphs, tables and statistics, since you might have one of those in your exams. So today we're gonna have a look at first we're gonna have a look at the types of graphs, charts and tables and statistics. Just to give you a quick overview what is out there. Then of course, as always, I'm gonna give you some useful phrases that help you to describe graphs, charts, tables and statistics. And then we're gonna have a more detailed look at graphs and charts, tables and statistics. And as always, in the end, we're gonna do a practice and demonstration of describing graphs, tables and statistics, where I prepared a pie chart and a graph. Yes. So let's jump right into the first point: types of graphs, charts, tables and statistics. The first one we see here, do we have any viewers actually? So we can make a quiz out of it? No. Okay. Doesn't matter. I'm gonna tell you anyway. So the first type is a pie chart. You might have seen pie charts anywhere. There are very common means to help you illustrate something in a better way. And yeah, basically pie charts are very common. So if you have an exam, might prepare for a pie chart. So another type of graphs, charts or tables is actually graphs. So this graphs here, I hope you can see. Yeah, it's a graph that shows you different types or different numbers, percentage. In this case, it shows you the top 20 internet countries with the highest number of users in 2013. As you can see here, China is on the very top, closely followed by, no, not closely, just followed by the United States. Then India, Brazil, Japan, Russia, Germany, Nigeria, and is there Austria on there? No. Spain and Italy are the last place, 19 and 20. So no Austria on there? No. Basically, yeah, we have what I told you. It's a chart. What did I say? Did I say graph? Chart. Yeah. Anyway, this is a traditional graph. So this is actually the graph, and that's a diagram. In this case, this diagram or graph, basically the graph illustrates the things, so you always talk about the graph, of course. It's all about the percentage of SVD spending 80% or more of school day in general education and classroom. We're gonna have a closer look into this topic in a few minutes. I think this type, so the graph, is also a very common means for describing something, describing percentage, describing, for example, fertility or something like this. Whereas the type we see here, namely tables, are not that common, I think. They're quite more, of course. There isn't that much illustration going on right there, so it's more difficult to imagine the actual amount, in this case the percentage. I think it's always a bit more easier if you have something that is illustrated where you can just see a different development in there, like with this graph. But here at the table, of course, you can't see anything being illustrated, but you have to use your own imagination. In this case, it is the percentage of homicides with firearms. So Colombia has the highest percentage of homicides with firearms with 85%, followed by the USA with 46%, and followed by Switzerland, followed by 37%, which is quite odd that Switzerland, yeah, of course, they have a lot of weapons, but I didn't know that they also use it for homicides. Yeah, let's talk about vocabulary and useful phrases. Since you're doing the A-levels, and since you have to describe some sort of one of those four types I just showed you, vocabulary and phrases are very important. So the basic things, so the very basics, let's call them, are listed here. We're gonna have a more detailed look, of course. But the things or the vocabulary and phrases you really have to know are increase and decrease, climb and fall, rise and drop, and to plummet, which is to fall off very quickly or suddenly, is a very helpful word. It's not a super common word you might use in informal conversations or something, but it is a word you should use in the exam, since it is a word that is appropriate for this type of situation, and is almost like tailored for the level you are doing the exam. So another word, stagnate, it's very, and fluctuate are basically, you might know the words from German. Stagnieren, fluktuieren, stagnate, of course, something if it doesn't rise or fall. So it stagnieren, it stays at the same point for X amount of time. And fluctuate is basically if something goes like a product, units sold of a product go up and down, but there are no major falls or climbs. It's basically they're just tiny little ups and downs. Just imagine it like a wave that's basically fluctuates. So just to help you imagine the internal graph, your internal graph, of course. Phrases. I have a lot of phrases for you here, but of course there are other phrases. If you find other phrases in your book on the internet, use them. And yeah, the first phrase is very simple, a little starter phrase, I'd say. The graph shows that blah blah blah. So you always start off with what does the graph, the table, or the chart show. So don't start like in the first 2 years, the amount of cattle that I don't know. You do understand what I mean. So don't start off with actually describing the graph. Start off with telling the people, in this case the examiner, what the graph is all about. What does the graph show? So maybe the graph shows cars, how many cars were sold from the period from 2005 and 2010. Or maybe the graph shows how many units of jeans there were sold from 1991 to until 2018 or up until now. Yeah. Same goes with this pie chart illustrates, for example. Illustrates is a very good word, I think, to describe graphs, charts. Something that is illustrated, use the graph. Illustrates, the pie chart illustrates. It is really helpful for you and the examiner to use those phrases or words like illustrate, which is just more appropriate for the level you're doing the exam. If you go a bit more deeper into describing pie charts, in this case, you'd start off with the slices of this pie chart, compare, or the slices of this pie chart show, or the slices of this pie chart, just to give you an idea of how it works. Or phrases, temperatures or sales increased in February. Always be sure which tense you use. So in order to find out which tense you should use, have a look at the graph and have a look at the different axes you have on the graph, and therefore you can evaluate. Maybe there is the time span from 1950 to 1980, so you'd stay in the past. And maybe there is something documented that started in the past and is documented up until now and still continues. So it's in the future it will be documented, but then you'd use the present perfect, of course, and so on. Maybe there are predictions of the future. There are a lot of prediction when we talk about the reduction of CO2 emissions, for example. Costa Rica just decided, or the First Lady of Costa Rica just decided that they want to reduce their CO2 emissions by 2050, I think, or they want to reduce the cars that are fueled with fossil fuels by 2050 to zero. So they want to just use electric cars, or especially as means of transportation. So they want to replace the trucks. If you have something like this, you talk about those graphs in the future tenses. If there are any graphs that describe a possible reduction, for example, of CO2 emissions, or reduction of the quality of the living quality there in Costa Rica. Okay, of course, something has increased, decreased, then we use the adverbs slightly, significantly, or dramatically to just add a little spice on there and show off what you've got, actually. And something can also increase or decrease slowly, gradually, steadily, or rapidly. So be sure to practice those adverbs, not only practice but study them and try to revise them as often as possible. And something can also remain relatively or extremely stable. In this case, I think I need to here, of course, this is all written not in capital letters. Yeah, this too, but I think you get what I mean here. Or something can also level off at in this case at 9% or another percentage, which means it stopped to decrease or increase. If you want to talk about another graph or another part of a graph or if you want to talk about a different slice of the pie chart or different column of the table, you can just use the phrase, let me draw your attention to this part of the graph, to this part of the pie chart. What else do we use? Comparison, of course. Something is as big as, or something is bigger than something. Yeah, those are basically the words that you have to use or should use. And now I'm going to tell you how you can use different words for describing graphs and charts. In this case, we're talking about something that increases. So something can boost, something can climb, something can rise, go up, and so on. If you want to talk about something that increases in a more extreme way, you can use the terms rocket up, to soar, or to shoot up, or my personal favorite, to skyrocket. I think skyrocket is the most easy to remember, the word that is most easily to remember. If something has reached its peak, you can use the term to peak, or to reach a maximum, or to reach an extreme. If it's really something outstanding that you want to highlight. So the car sales reached an extreme in March 2009, for example. The same goes with something that decreases. We can use decline, fall, drop, decrease, or deteriorate. If there is a more steep graph that shows a extreme decrease or a extreme decline, you can use the words collapse or crash, plunge, slump, or plummet. Be sure to use those vocabulary very often, but of course try to mix it up. Make a mingle of those beautiful words. And of course the same goes with if something has peaked, something can also reach a low, or bottom out, or to hit a low. If we want to use other phrases, then if something declines or increases, we can use phrases like to remain stable, steady, or unchanged, to stay constant, or to stabilize, or to stagnate. Something can even out, or something can flatten out, level off, level out. Yeah. Basically, those are the things you should know in order to describe graphs, charts, and tables. At this point, I'd ask again if there are there any questions? I'm sorry.
No questions, no.
No questions so far. If you have any questions, you all know, ask us in the chat, and we try to come back as soon as possible. So in this case, I've prepared statistics. In this case, it's from Pew Research. I use this link. It's a very popular website too, that has tons of statistics actually. In this case, it's about 4 in 10 US adults say they live in a gun-owning household. We have graphs here, we have a pie chart here. What else? Yeah, I think a big pie chart is something like small graphs. In this case, it's just 3 slices. 57% live in a household with no guns. 30% currently own a gun. Here it's very something special with this pie chart is that 24% live in a household with a gun, but 30% of that 42% currently own a gun, and 11% of those 42% don't currently own a gun but live with someone who does own a gun, of course. And there is another chart that illustrates if you grew up in a household with guns, or say at least someone of their friends own a gun, or have shot a gun, which is 72% is quite high. Yeah. And we could go on about the gun laws, but we won't, since we will continue with describing tables. In this case, I think tables are the most difficult type of charts, graphs, and so on to describe, and therefore I've prepared again some phrases that might help you to overcome any fears that are associated with describing tables. In this case, you can use the phrase like the first column shows, so just a very, very easy description of the table. And you just start off with the first column shows or the second column shows. Then the first line, you can see that Colombia, blah 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 blah. Then of course, making comparison with tables, graphs, and charts is important. So in this case, I'm comparing Spain with Colombia. Compared to Spain, there is a significantly higher number of homicides in Colombia. The second highest number of homicides with firearms can be found in the US. So be sure not to start off with the highest number, the second highest, the third highest, the fourth highest. It doesn't work. That's boring, and it might get you to some positive mark, but it will be not very good, I think. And the last sentence is a sentence for experts, I'd say. If you want to use something like this, it is something you could show off, I think, in front of your examiners. In this case, you could use the phrase like, it is quite surprising to me that 37% of all homicides in Switzerland are committed with firearms, which is, of course, quite surprising still. Be sure to revise. You can use this YouTube video. It is stored on our YouTube channel, so be sure to use this YouTube video to revise your phrases vocabulary, or just write it down in your vocabulary book or whatever you have to remember phrase and vocabulary, and revise it every week. I think every week is fine. So now I'm gonna show you how to do it, but I'm gonna show you with the phrases. So I'm gonna jump back to the phrases and words we have used so that you can follow a bit better what you need to do when you have a graph, a table, or statistics in front of you. Is what does the graph, table, or statistic show? So very basic question you have to answer. Then you go a bit more into detail, so you examine the graph, table, or statistics, and explain what the horizontal and vertical axis show. So the line graph or bar chart, columns and rows, in this table, in this case, and then start to describe. So in this first example, we have different slices here. So what does the graph, table, or statistic show? You just read the headline and form a sentence, basically. So this pie chart shows the breakdown of electricity consumption in 2008 by categories of consumption in Austria. Then explain what the horizontal vertical axis show. In this case, it's not an axis, it's neither a column nor a row, since those are slices of a pie chart. Those slices show, in this case, the different categories of consumption in percentage. So there is heating, large domestic appliances, water heating, fridges, and so on and so on. Okay, so step 2 also completed, and then you start to describe. So maybe it's basically personal preference. You can start with the smallest or the tiniest slice here, 3.5%, which is other kitchen and domestic appliances. Or you could start with the biggest one. Of course, starting with the biggest one is, I think, a bigger temptation with starting with the smaller ones or the tiny ones. So therefore, start off with the bigger ones. So just start with the biggest category of consumption in 2008 was the heating, compared to the heating system or the heating. Other kitchen and domestic appliances make up only a small amount or small percentage of those categories of consumption. And try to compare it as I've did just now. Maybe there's some things that are quite surprising to you. So maybe that the lighting takes 8.5%. Yeah, it's basically how you go on and on with this pie chart, or with pie charts in general. This is a graph I've created by myself, just to show you how you can best practice with it. So I hope you can read it. Oh, it's the other way. Yeah. So the horizontal axis shows the months. The vertical axis shows the units sold. And then you can start in January. Of course, we start. What does the graph table statistics show? In this case, it shows the worldwide sales of product X by company X. And then we're gonna continue with the axis. In this case, units sold and months. And then we start to describe again. In this case, we can, if you want to, you can just pick out a very an event that is quite outstanding here. For example, in June, so the year, just, I don't know the year, so just come up with a year. So it's 2017. In June 2017, the units sold peaked with, or no, in June 2017, there were 90,000 units were sold, and 90,000 units were sold, but the units sold plummeted up until July, or plummeted from the beginning of June until the beginning of July, and then they slightly decreased, and decreased, of course. Words we can use here, of course, I used here plummet. If we want to describe May, for example, in May there were, in May 2017, 35,000 units were sold, and from May until June, beginning of June, sales skyrocketed, or sales increased extremely, and peaked at 90,000. Peaked at 90,000 in the beginning of June. So be sure to maybe pick out those that are more extreme, like those, this graph, this line, this here, and here, which we can use our fancy word stagnate. Yes. So, which is it, from the beginning of March until the end of, until the beginning of April, sales stagnated at 75,000 units. Of course, this graph might be a bit unrealistic, but it helps you to practice. And I hope it helps you to practice. Yes, that's basically it for today. If you have any questions, again, ask us in the chat and we will come back to them, or to the question, as soon as possible. Yeah, I wish you a very pleasant evening and good night.